Real people, real obstacles, real solutions. Today is, I think, kind of one of the more inspiring parts of the opening so far, because there's an old saying that no matter how far down the scale that you've fallen, that you can get up and you can change the direction of your life by changing your behaviors. And I believe that two things: changing our beliefs and then engaging in behaviors that are consistent with what we want in our life are going to ultimately drive us in the direction of the things that we want. And I had never realized that. I was trapped in the cycle of addiction. I was trapped in the cycle of shame-based behavior, shame-based beliefs. And when I sought help, what I can say is I wish I had known the possibilities that existed for my life. Because what I was about to embark on was some of the deepest self-discovery that I'd ever engaged in. And there were really three parts to it. The first thing was building a recovery foundation. So creating abstinence, and long-term sobriety came from developing a bunch of behaviors. So I got behind all of those behaviors really consistently from the get-go. I started to attend regular support group meetings virtually every day so that I could learn more about the disease of alcoholism and addiction. I could relate to other people that were suffering in the same ways that I was, and I could continue to see the things that they were doing that were working for them. I got a person in my life that I could be accountable to, somebody that had long-term sobriety, who had a set of directions.
What does that mean, long-term sobriety?
Well, for me, this guy had I think at the time that I selected him to be my sponsor, he had about 3 years of sobriety, which for me, given that I hadn't been able to put together a day, was long term. But I think anybody that's been through the work, and completed the steps, is perfectly qualified. I always tell people, to know what you want and know what you're looking for, and identifying someone that you can be accountable to. And for me, that included, somebody that had, the life that I wanted. So the guy that I became accountable to, had a family, had been through the 12 steps of recovery, was living a life that, was congruent with the things that he wanted and the things that I wanted. And so I asked him if he would take me through the work, and if I could be accountable to him for the things that I wanted to do. And so we embarked on that journey together. So I started to build this team around me of people. They say, if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And while I was hanging out with guys that were doing coke in the bathroom and drinking all night before this, it's like I completely changed the connection that I had to the people that were closest to me. And I'll talk about the idea of change a little further in the story. But for me, at least initially, I had to get connected to a bunch of people that were doing things that sober and happy people did. And so I built this team around me to start to improve my emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being. So I had a therapist that I saw. I was seeing Paul, I think, twice a week at the time. I had a lot of work to do on myself. I was part of a support group. I had an accountability mentor in my life that I was accountable to. I had committed to a health and wellness program, so I started to see a personal trainer 3 days a week and committed to the things that he wanted me to do on a regular basis. And so everything, and all at the same time, continuing to stay actively involved in my business career. I had a 35-person real estate company that I was president of. It was 2008. So 2007 was the last big recession that we hit. It was from a real estate standpoint, we had to walk through some really challenging times and kind of get our projects through those. And we were building, several large retail projects. And so I had to stay involved in all of that. And I joined a support group. I went to process group for adults who had been violently abused to start dealing with my childhood trauma issues. And so it was a heavy load of self-development work. but it literally changed my life. In every aspect of my life started to slowly change. There was no quick fix. So, developing a set of behaviors that go along with changing your life requires consistency. There were many days that it was just, it felt exhausting. But those first years were incredibly rewarding, and incredibly challenging. It's like drugs and alcohol keep all of the dealing with life at bay. It's like you're existing, and it feels like, I always liken it to, imagine walking through a junkyard, a car junkyard with shrapnel and metal and all these banged up cars. And they have those huge magnets that pull all the cars up that they put into the compactor.
Yeah.
It's like when I was drinking and using, there was this huge magnet over my life that I felt like was keeping all of the pain away from me, and I was walking through this existence kind of numb. And when I got sober, it was like somebody turned the magnet switch off and all the shit just fell from the sky. And it was, my marriage was challenging. My relationship with my kids was challenging. I mean, this double life of that I had been leading compressed into one life. And what really came to light was the true nature of my character, the way that I had been behaving. And that was painful for people to see. And so I was dealing with, the effects of having let a lot of people down in my life, while at the same time trying to change my life. I think it's one of the biggest challenges in recovery is those early days of, recognizing the pain that you've caused, seeing that pain in the eyes of the people that you said you cared about, and then trying to change the behavior that goes along with the new life that you want, while still having, these massive consequences associated with the life that you'd have been living. And so to me, that's where perseverance comes in. That's where commitment comes in, because, to me, it's that idea that every event in life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I was, what had happened, I couldn't change. I couldn't deny the things that I had done. I couldn't deny the behaviors I'd engaged in. I couldn't deny the way that I'd been living. Those were all factual, right, Chaz?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what was going to happen. I had no idea where my life was going to lead. I didn't know professionally where I was going to end up. I didn't know personally where I was going to end up. I didn't know if my marriage would survive, the discovery and the betrayal that I had been involved in. I didn't know where my relationship with my children was going to go. I mean, literally every aspect of my life was as uncertain as it's ever been. But I knew that where I was going really depended on one thing, and that was what I did today. And the more I could change the way I felt about myself and the behaviors that I engaged in, and ensure that those behaviors were consistent with where I wanted to go, not where I'd been, then I ensured myself a better chance that my life would turn out better than it had been. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you say that it was more uncertain, is this after you had gotten sober, things became more uncertain?
Absolutely.
Because you were airing it out.
Absolutely. I'd been living a double life, hiding a lot of the things that I'd been doing.
So you stopped hiding those things.
Absolutely. The truth came out,
Right.
I mean, this guy's a drug addict. This guy's an alcoholic. I mean, before it was just, he's unreliable. He's, moody. He's, a lot of different things. He's not enjoyable to be around, but maybe that's just the nature of his character. But to find out that I truly was, using drugs and using alcohol and engaging in, unhealthy behaviors and betraying, my family and the things that they had thought I was doing were different. I mean, those are heavy betrayals for people to face, and there's a lot of pain involved in that. And so how people handle that in your life, my business relationships, finding out that I was an alcoholic and that I had been, neglecting some of my business responsibilities. I mean, there's a lot of consequences and a lot of uncertainty around with how are people going to deal with this new me, because it's one of the things that kept me in the shadows for so long was exactly this. It was the
fear of taking all this on.
Yeah, fear of taking all this on. And I think it keeps a lot of people. So it's like you build up your negative bank account. You're engaging in all these behaviors and are continuing to rack up this wreckage because you're afraid to face the wreckage. And ultimately, when you do, whatever you've put into that wreckage bank account has got to be, the check always gets paid. You ultimately, and I think that's one of the things that I've found the most empowering is that I faced all of that head on. I faced whatever the consequences were going to be from all that. I faced with the commitment that I would never go back to engaging in those old behaviors again. So I'm not that guy anymore. And people can judge me, and people can criticize me, and people can cast me aside, and I'm, it's everybody knows my marriage did not last, the low spots and the betrayal. My marriage ended in 2016, and I had to walk a new path. And my relationship with my children, was strained at various times with my daughter and my son as a result of the fact that they found out that their father was not the man that they thought they would be. And I had to accept all that, and I had to accept the consequences of my behavior. There's a triad now of behaviors that I think are really important, accountability, focus, and hope. Those are the three things that, I have to be accountable for the life I lead. I have to be focused on the life that I want. And I have to be hopeful and optimistic that if, I engage in the behaviors that are consistent with the life I want, that I'll be more likely to have the life that I want. But yeah, I mean, to me, and if anybody faces that, I think, part of overcoming out loud is to let people know that you can get through that. The joy, the peace, the daily peace of being accountable for those things. I did these things. I don't deny them. And they shape who I was, but they will not define who I'm going to be. Right. And that's, to me, the most important thing. That's the freeing part of recovery is and I say this all the time, the rear view mirror is much smaller than the windshield. It's an experience that I can't deny happened. I learn from it. I acknowledge it. I accept whatever consequences come from it. And I make a conscious decision that the behaviors I engage in today will be different. And if I engage in different behaviors, I'm ensuring that I will get different results. You can't, you reap what you sow in life. And if you plant radishes, you're going to reap radishes. If you plant cucumbers, you're going to reap cucumbers. You can't plant addiction, alcoholism, betrayal, deception, dishonesty, and get happiness. You get shame and you get guilt. If you plant honesty, integrity, hope, you will get peace. You will get fulfillment. And to me, that's the biggest recipe. And out of great pain comes growth. If I stayed in my comfort zone, denying, avoiding, drinking, I would have stayed numb. And ultimately, I think, I would have either died a sudden death as a result of the behaviors I was engaged in. I was, consuming opioids and drinking and, the kinds of things that literally take people off the face of the earth. Or I would have died worse, the slow death, as I talk about sometimes, that erosion of self-worth, that erosion of self-esteem. And I'm here to say that this path is way better. This path is way more free. This path is literally limitless. I believe today, that if I engage in the behaviors consistent with the life that I want, and I do that consistently, that I can achieve anything I want. I mean, since so my West Trust Ventures, which was the business I had with a partner that I ran, dissolved in 2012. We sold our last big shopping center, and I got involved in building some other small retail projects that we had as legacy projects. I still have some of that now, and then I've morphed into a whole new chapter of my life, with new relationships and new business ventures. And I'm 54 years old, and I have more energy and more passion for life than I've ever had before. And I think, congruency and alignment is a huge part of that. When we align our behaviors with our beliefs, and we do that consistently, and we have this image, self-image, and I manage my self-image today proactively. Do you understand what that means?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should expand on that.
So we essentially have an inner critic, and many people who are in recovery or have suffered childhood trauma or have been engaging in drugs and alcohol have a very loud inner critic. That inner critic is comprised of a number of things. It's comparing ourselves to others. It's heavily vested in other people's opinions. It lives in the past. It's focused on being perfect. It's focused on outcomes, or as I like to say, the prize. And about 80% of our thoughts, are negative. And so this inner critic, and then when you back that up with either childhood trauma, which reinforced that you're not good enough, and then shame and guilt-based behaviors and substance abuse, that inner critic gets very loud and usually, kind of rules the day, And so if I'm not good enough, if I'm not smart enough, if I can't deal with life, if I've got this inability to I've got this kind of external locus of control, as the psychologist will say, where I think, my life is heavily dependent upon other people and that I don't really have any control. And, given the nature of my character, I'm destined to fail. Those are kind of the thoughts that drove my existence prior to recovery. And today, what I foster is what I like to call my inner champion. So my inner champion is my own opinion of myself, how I view myself. I spend a lot of time creating a visual image of myself and writing affirmations about myself, focused on who I am, not who I'm not. And I think, the internal voice, the internal influence I have over myself is so great that if I don't advance it, that the inner critic ultimately is the voice I listen to. And so I've got a choice today to listen to my inner critic or my inner champion. And the inner champion focuses on progress, not perfection. The inner champion focuses on the process, the things that I do every day, not so much the outcomes. My inner critic focuses on the past. My inner champion focuses on the present. What can I do today? I always believe, by the way, I always believe today there are things I can engage in, healthy behaviors I can engage in that are consistent with the life that I want. And I think the more I get behind those behaviors, the more I can stay out of shame and guilt. So I've got this inner champion and this self-image, which takes work to develop. But I don't think, in general, people are really taught to champion themselves. I think it comes across as maybe prideful or egotistical or conceited. And the truth is,
sometimes they are those things, right? Sometimes people are probably a bit on the scale of, it could be ego, and it can be an unhealthy amount of. I think there can be an unhealthy amount of ego.
Yeah, and so what you have to do is you have a set of values, right? So if you have a set of values which are selfless, integrity, honesty, hope, and then you set your barometer for the thermostat for your life that's consistent with those, especially one of my values being humility, then I can set a realistic thermostat. I mean, what I tell people and what I've learned is that our self-image is much like a thermostat. A thermometer just tells what the temperature is. A thermostat regulates it, right? So if you were to set your self-image if you were to set a thermostat on the wall at 70 and it chills off to about 65, what happens? The thermostat kicks on and warms the room up until it's 70, right? What happens when it gets to 75? The thermostat kicks off. And I think our self-image is a thermostat. We'll never perform above our self-image. Our willpower is always going to lose to our self-identity. So if we don't aim high and we don't set our goals high as it relates to who we think we are, we're going to always level down. That's why so many people that win the lottery go bankrupt within 5 years. Because if you have an unhealthy relationship with money before you win the lottery and you don't change your self-image or your behaviors, you're going to level right back down to be the same person that you always were. And so I think it's important upon us, it's critical upon us to develop a healthy self-image of ourselves and reinforce that self-image with behaviors. And visualize the life that we want to have and how we want to show up in the world. And it actually propels us towards that life, believe it or not.
This reminds me of George Mumford's "Which Wolf Grows."
That's right. It's very similar. It's the same analogy. I mean, the Indian story that we have two wolves fighting inside of us for food, and one wolf is the hindrances, the hate, the comparison to others, the anxiety, the worry, the fear, the aggression. And the other wolf is love and compassion and empathy and humility. And the little Indian boy asks his dad, well, which wolf lives?
Which wolf grows?
Which wolf grows? And the Indian dad says, it's the one you feed. And so to me, it's what you put in, you get out. And if I put love in, I'm going to get love out. If I put hard work in, I'm going to get hard results out. And that's the nature of my life today is strictly focused on my own. I think leadership, as an example, is really I think Simon Sinek says it best. It's leadership isn't being in charge. It's taking care of the people in your charge. And I think, before you can lead others, you have to lead yourself. So, what most people want out of life is respect, empowerment, trust, and validation. And I think if you don't respect, empower, trust, and validate yourself, it's very hard to give that to other people. That's why I think so many leaders today fall into the trap of, micromanaging or, negative reinforcement versus, what really helps people is to feel empowered and trusted. And I think that all starts, from the inside and how we view ourselves.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who is in the position you were before? They're looking at, so let's say someone is in a tough spot, maybe with addiction or something along those lines. They're looking at what it looks like. They might have even run it over in their head a few times, what this looks like if they were to make this next really huge step, like the one you made. But they're stuck in that spot where they know how hard it's going to be, and it's at the current time for them, it's more comfortable to stay in the lies and the twisting of things and getting things to just barely skim by. Basically, I think we all know how that, me and you know how that experience is. So what would you say to somebody who's in that spot, and is it for you, it was worth it? Is it worth it to tear the walls down and bear it all to move forward?
Always. It's never not. It's, in my experience, it's never not been worth it. Look, growth comes when you get outside your comfort zone. Any growth, and you don't have to be sick. We say this a lot in the platform of Limitless Minds and some of the mental psychology work that I do with Trevor Moad's, teaching Trevor Moad's book and his teachings. You don't have to be sick to get better. You don't have to, fall down any further, decide to change. And so the only question is, are you happy? Not comfortable. Are you happy with the life that you have? And if you're not, the opportunity to grow is always worth it. The out of great pain comes great reward. And look, the pain is an illusion, in my opinion. I mean, it's confronting and becoming accountable for your life. It's actually more empowering than painful, in my opinion. To stay stuck and trapped and feel out of control and feeling hopeless. I mean, it's an easy trade for me. It's actually not a hard trade because it's not painful. I mean, the pain is an illusion. The pain is the actual joy of finally being accountable for my life and being responsible for the life that I do want to have and taking responsibility for the things that I do. That enthusiasm's common. Everyone gets geared up for the first week of a workout program or the first few days of a diet or, the first couple of days of a writing assignment. And then it gets hard. I mean, everything worthwhile in life gets hard. Then it's I've got to go for a run again on day 6, or then I've got to get to the gym again on day 13, or I've got to read for 15 minutes again on day 30. And that's where in my opinion, that's where the greatest growth comes. That's what separates, the imposters from the superstars, and that's what separates the mediocre existence with the exceptional existence, is when we push through those resistance points and say, it doesn't matter how I feel, I know this is in my best interest and I'm going to do it. But until you change your self-image, until you see yourself as somebody who, the longer you see yourself as a smoker, you'll stay a smoker. The longer you see yourself as a drinker, the longer you'll stay a drinker. The more you see yourself as not worthy, the longer you'll stay not worthy. And so you have these beliefs, and then, we have this theory called confirmation bias. You understand confirmation bias, you understand that your mind literally wants to support what it believes about itself. So you will continually seek out things that prove the facts that you believe about yourself. So if you believe I'm not worth it, right? You'll be looking throughout the day for the mistakes you made, for the shortcomings that you have that support the fact that you're not worth it. And so your mind is going to seek out the things that support what you believe about yourself in its subconscious. Our subconscious mind, okay, listens to our conscious mind. So what we say, how we turn up the thermostat, our actual subconscious is going to regulate to that, and it's going to look for things that believe it. So if you believe that you're worth it, if you believe that you have the ability, self-esteem is just the belief that I have the worth to deal with life as life comes to me. That's at its basic. It's I'm good enough, just as I am. Now, I had this interesting conversation yesterday with a really great friend of mine who's a therapist, and made it very clear that the cognition that my best is good enough doesn't mean that I can't improve. My best is always good enough. That doesn't mean, that's not mutually exclusive to the fact that there's always things I could do to improve. I always look for the things that I can do to improve. But I don't self-deprecate and say because I didn't do as well as I could do, right? If I engaged in different behavior, that somehow I'm not good enough. My best is always good enough. So we've got to self-regulate, and then our minds are going to look for things that support that. And that's what's driving the life that I have today. And that's why I've started, the new businesses that I've started. That's why I've engaged in a public speaking career. That's why I've engaged in my executive recovery program. That's why I've engaged in guest lecturing. These are all things that I'd never done before, but I literally, and consulting for major, high net worth individuals and very successful, businesses here in the Los Angeles area. These are all things that I've manifested out of the belief I have about myself that I'm worthy, and that I'm capable, and that I'm intelligent, and that I'm worth it. And when I'm worth it, it's worth it. And that's, I think, what I really implore everybody out there to start to validate is that they're worth it. And if they're worth it, it's worth it. What do I mean by it? The things that they need to do to get the life that they want.